Welcome to the Work-Life Balance Summit, Design a Faith-Filled Life. My name is Staci Witten, and today I am here with Angela Herrington. So excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Angela J. Herrington is the founder of Broken Beautiful Bold online women's ministry. She's also a life and digital strategy coach for Christian entrepreneurs. She loves helping women find freedom and fulfillment in their God-given calling. She holds a BA from Indiana Wesleyan and a master's in leadership from Wesley Seminary. Interestingly, and I find this really interesting, that her graduate research project focused on leadership development and on opportunities for Gen X women in the U.S. church. She is a wife, mom of 5, that's very busy, and lives in Indiana with her family when they're not traveling the U.S. in their RV. Now that to me is an intentional living. I love that. I love that. You are definitely a busy woman. Tell me a little bit how you live intentionally or find that work-life balance.
Yeah, so busy is definitely one of those words that resonates with me. But what I have found as I started putting on more and more and more hats is that busy isn't always a good thing. So it's good to be productive, it's good to be fruitful, but busy just for the sake of busy is actually a huge detriment to our faith, to our health, to our family life, and all those kind of things. So it's just been over the last few years, and especially since I've finished my master's degree, where I've been able to take a step back and say, okay, yes, I'm doing what I was called to do. I have a family that I love. There's a lot of things in my life that are really good, but am I being intentional about the things I'm saying yes to? And what I found is that there were a lot of things I was saying yes to that were good things, but they weren't good things for me. And by that, I mean nonprofits I was volunteering for, time that I was donating, things that I was giving away, basically giving away energy to things that were producing good results, that were helping other people. But they weren't necessarily speaking to the core of what God was calling me to do, which means that I didn't have anything left to do those things that he was calling me to do. So a big part of finding the balance for me is asking whether or not this thing that I want to say yes to, is it actually part of what God is calling me to? Or is it just something nice to do that would be great, but it goes at the bottom of the list if I have anything left that I might give some energy there? So it's a lot of triaging based on what God is calling me to do rather than just, hey, that would be fun or that would help people. If you use that would help people as your measure of should I do this or not, it's really easy to burn out because there are always people that you're able to help, but they're not always the same people that God is putting in front of you for your specific calling.
I love that. So what is your criteria, or just give us an idea of your criteria if that is something that you should say yes to?
Yeah, so it's going to be different for everybody. It really is, because it's based on where you're at right now and what God is calling you to. For me, my core calling, the thing that God asks me to do is to help women find freedom and fulfillment in their God-given calling. And so working with women one-on-one, working with women in my Sisterhood Cafe, which is a membership group, working with clients through my courses, all of those things are important. So if God is calling me to do those things, if this thing that's in front of me is actually going to draw me away from those, then it's probably not a good idea. Or if it's something that God is saying, hey, I want you to pay attention to this, paying attention to something doesn't always mean intervening. So sometimes God calls us to be aware of things, but not necessarily to step in and fix them. So that's the second thing that I ask is God calling my attention to this because he wants me to do something or because he wants me to be aware of it because it's going to impact what I'm already doing? And that happens a lot. And then the other criteria are basically, is there room for this? Is there room in my daily life for this? Is this something that requires 3 hours a day? And I just don't have 3 hours a day right now. It's not okay to put everything in your life on hold to do something that is going to burn you out, that's going to drain you, that's, pulls you away from your calling, pulls you away from your family. Those are not the things that are of God. If we're saying yes to those kind of things, it's probably because we're seeking some sort of approval or a validation through those things. And that's really chasing the wrong carrot, if you will.
That makes total sense. I love that. So what obstacles do you face when you're having to decide things like this?
I think it's the same obstacles that everybody has to face. It's hard to say no because we're worried about disappointing people or, discouraging people or people being mad or making them feel like we don't value them. But as my platform has grown, one of the things that has become abundantly clear is that you can't meet every need that's put in front of you. You can't say yes to everything. Every time you say yes to something that's not really your calling, you have to say no to something that is your calling. And that's a huge price to pay. It affects us physically, emotionally, spiritually. It really bankrupts us if we're not careful. So those, I think, are the big concerns, the big worries. A lot of times we worry about what will happen if we don't meet that need or we don't say yes, but we don't think about the cost of saying yes when it's not a good fit. So I would always encourage everybody to think about, what is the cost of saying no to this, but what's also the cost of saying yes? What am I going to give up to make this fit? And does this actually move me closer to God and move me closer to the ideal that God has for my life? Or is it just something that's going to impress a lot of people? Because those aren't always the same.
Yeah, and that's not the reason to do it.
Yeah.
It's just
right.
not. That can cause burnout right there too.
Absolutely, because you're always chasing approval.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are invested in you because you're doing things for them, the only way you get their approval is by doing things for them. And it's just a hamster wheel. If you're serving in a volunteer role, as long as you're serving that organization's needs, then you get their approval. But when it's not time anymore, or when you have to step out, that organization can't be your only source of positive affirmation. That organization can't be the only one that says you matter. Because if that organization goes away, then are you sitting there thinking, well, I just don't matter anymore? Like, that's where we have to be really careful. What are we allowing to define us? Whose feedback is it that's defining us? The people around us or God? Because sometimes they don't always match up, and that's okay. That's totally okay.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And you have to really have those conversations with God to determine that and help him guide you. I
absolutely
so agree with you.
Yeah.
So how does your expertise help with work-life balance?
So one of the things that I really love to do is to help women find that balancing place where they're surrounded by all these different demands. There's family life, there's business, there's ministry, there's house cleaning, there's day-to-day job tasks that have to be done. But at some point in their life, there's a sweet spot where they're serving those roles with healthy boundaries. And doing the ministry that God called them to do doesn't get in the way of being mom, doesn't get in the way of being a wife. That's where freedom and fulfillment come in. If we're really answering the call that God has put on our lives in the way that he wants us to answer it, then we don't have to worry about burnout. But we get so excited about serving God sometimes that we turn everything else upside down. And we just say, okay, well, I'll get back to those other things when I get to where I need to be with God. And there's kind of a false logic there, right? It's almost like when we look at God and we say, okay, I'm going to do what you're calling me to do when I'm good enough, when I get my house in order, then I'm going to come and serve you. And God wants us to serve in the midst of life. So I don't really think he's calling us to put everything else on hold and to turn things upside down to serve him. God's not going to call us to serve him in a way that destroys our family. That doesn't really align with who he is or what he values. So what we have to make sure that we're doing is finding the balancing point. Where can we be women in ministry, women in our home, women in a relationship, women in the workplace, and not burn out? And so I think a coach is super important for that, because we get to be a guide for women who are a few steps behind us to say, okay, here's where you're feeling pulled. Watch out for these booby traps. Watch out for these ledges that are a little steep and don't have a guardrail on them. It's not about, it's not a consulting, it's not a telling people what to do type role. It's a really cool, a journey that you get to go on with people. And I get to be the guide that says, hey, try this. and then they get to go do it. Or I get to say, hey, it feels like you're really worried about this. Let's process it. Let's talk through it and see where that anxiety is coming from and see where God is in the picture. Because through that exploration, then they learn to kind of have that exploration on their own with God. And it's just a really cool kind of thing. I mean, I would love to work with women so just intensely that at some point they don't need me anymore. That at some point their path is clear and they're good to go, and kind of put myself out of work. But most of us need that guide forever. I'm a coach and I have a coach. I totally believe in coaching. But yeah, that's kind of how I help. I come alongside women and really use all the experience that I've got, the ministry background, the coaching background, and all the different things, and just kind of put that in their toolbox and say, okay, where is God calling us to go together?
Oh, I love that. And I love that you said that you also have a coach. I have a coach too. And without that partnership, or I just encourage people to have that partnership with someone, because it can really help you think outside the box. It can really help you have those conversations with yourself and with God better. And it's really, I know in Christian coaching, you probably experience this too, where God is part of that conversation.
Absolutely.
It's three people, or it's three of you. It's you, your coach, and God. And makes a huge difference in your life.
It makes a difference. It does. It does. And you can go through a lot of training modules, take courses, those kind of things. And those don't necessarily have to be faith-centered courses.
Right.
I feel that's what I did when I first started out with my ministry, and I didn't know how to use social media. I took a lot of classes from people who weren't Christians, and that was okay, because that was a process, a system, a skill that I was learning. But when it really comes to being in the trenches with somebody and having these wrestling matches with yourself and with God and with the life that you're trying to build, you've got to have somebody that aligns with your faith, because otherwise they're never going to be able to understand the process of trusting God, even though what's laid out in front of you is so much more logical. Right? Like sometimes God says, take a right turn here. And the world says, why would you take a right turn? The path that you're on is already going so well. So for a coach, it really, especially if you're an entrepreneur or if you're starting a ministry, I serve a lot of ladies who have kind of one foot in the business world and one foot in the ministry world. And, whether it's direct sales or blogging or like we run a social media agency, those things are our ministry. So when we're making decisions about those businesses, that have a ministry focus, we've really got to have somebody on our team that's able to speak to the spiritual side of things and say, hey, I know this is a hard decision. Where is God in this conversation?
Love that. So how do you know when God is taking you to take that bold action?
Yeah. So there's, it's very situational. And what's really cool, what I love about God is that he speaks to us in ways that resonate with us. And so for me, a lot of times I will hear God say, do this. And even though I hear it, sometimes there are doubts that stir up, but that's totally, if that's you too, it's totally healthy. Don't worry about it. It's not a flaw. It's just our human nature. And so for me, I know that a lot of times when God takes those words that he has spoken to me and puts them in someone else's mouth and they come to me, then I know, hey, there's more than, I'm not the only person hearing this. I should pay attention to this. The other thing that I've heard a lot of people say is that there's just this spirit of discontent. There's something that it's almost like when you're starting to get sick and you know it's coming, but there's nothing you can do about it. You just sense it. A lot of times when God is calling us to take action and we're sitting back not taking action, we get that discontent. We know that there's something just a little bit off, but we can't quite put our finger on it. And so that to me is a huge red flag to go back to God and say, I feel like I'm missing something here. Or to go to our coach or to go to our advisor and say, you know what? I feel like I'm missing something here. Help me figure this out. Help me figure out what God is saying or has said in the past that I'm not taking action on.
I know what you're saying, because it's amazing when he shows up, because I know a lot of times I'm somebody that has a lot of ideas and I have to stop and pause.
Sure.
And I write those ideas down. And if I start to hear a pattern and hear it, if it keeps surfacing for me, whether it's I see something or whether I hear somebody else say it back to me, like you said, then that's when I really have to pray about it and say, okay, I'll take this leap.
Right, right. Yeah. And what's really fun is that sometimes yeah, a lot of times we downplay our intuition. We downplay that gut instinct. And I think Christians do a really bad job of this because we think that there's something woo-woo or weird about intuition. And there are so many times where God speaks to us in a way that we recognize it, but not fully.
Mm-hmm.
So when our intuition is saying, hey, pay attention here, it may be that small voice inside of us that has recognized that God is calling us to do something. And sometimes the do something actually is more of a stay still. And that's one of the challenges I see with women, because we are so used to serving people. We're serving in our house, we're serving in our business, we're serving in our ministry. And sometimes God says, whoa, time out, stop. Don't move on that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hardest thing. Like taking bold action, I think, is a little easier because we can do it afraid, but not taking action, intentionally saying, you know what, I'm just going to put myself in timeout here for a few minutes and really figure out what it is that God is saying to me. That's hard. That's really hard. So just keep in mind when we're talking about bold action, sometimes bold action means sitting still, and just give yourself the space to do that when God calls you to do it.
Oh, that's good. That's great advice. That is really good advice.
Thank you.
I also noticed that, and not just with myself, but with other women, that a lot of times when you're feeling in conflict, like something's off,
Mm-hmm.
and you're dreading whether it's going to work that next day or you are dreading a project, there's something that you need to, again, be still,
Right.
listen to that, because there's a reason you're having that feeling. If it's going against your values, or if it's maybe God is pulling you in a different direction. Do you ever see something like that?
I do. And I think that when it's something that's new, I think it's easier for us to take action. Where I see a lot of ladies get stuck, and men too, but mostly women that I work with, we get stuck when it's something that we've done in the past and it's been a good thing. So a season is ending, a job, we're getting really good reviews at work, but it's actually time for us to go somewhere else. Or we've been in a relationship, a best friend relationship for years, and that person's just moving in a different direction, and it's time for us to take a step back from that relationship. That's where I see us get conflicted the most and really get stuck, because we have this guilt thing that pops up where we say, you know what, why am I discontent with this job? Why is there any discontent? Why is my heart unhappy here? I'm getting great reviews. I love my coworkers. I know what I'm doing. I've been here for 5 years, or, I've been here for 20 years and it's been great. Why am I discontent? Why is there discontent? There must be something wrong with me. And we automatically assume that self-doubt, that little voice of self-doubt is right. And we automatically assume that we're doing something wrong and we need to fix the attitude, rather than looking at it and saying, okay, am I discontented because God is calling me somewhere else? Because a lot of times he is, but we're so connected to the identity of where we've been for the last 20 years that stepping away from that somehow seems wrong or flawed or like a mistake. And so we really have to kind of work through that process and again say, okay, God, what exactly is it that you're calling me to? And am I willing to say maybe? I did a Facebook Live a couple weeks ago where I was really just encouraging my followers to say maybe. Like, if you can't get to yes, that's okay. God is okay with a maybe. Just get it to a maybe. If he's calling you to do something, get to a maybe, and then let him work the miracles from there.
Oh, I love that. Be still and say maybe.
And say maybe. And you know what? You can say maybe as you bite your bottom lip and grit your teeth and not really sure. That's okay. It's still a maybe. And there's miracles in the maybes.
Totally get it. You've been so generous with your time. I appreciate you today. And share with us, you're offering a special gift to everyone that's participating, and it's called 22 Ways to Know When God is Calling You to Take Bold Action. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have that question all the time. How do I know? How do I know? How do I know? And so I asked a whole bunch of my super wise friends and created this free report for you guys. And you can get it at my website. It's angelajherrington.com/22, the numbers 22 -ways. And that you'll be able to download it immediately. It's a super quick read, and it's really inspiring. And I tell you a little bit about the people in there too, so you can kind of see what their background is. And they're all great Christians who literally walk the walk and who have taken some crazy bold steps in their life. And the fun thing is, I also have a free group that I run called the Christian Women Who Lead. It's a free Facebook group. And when you download a copy of the 22 Ways free report, there's actually a little invite on the bottom of that page that will allow you to join that group. And we've got, I think we're almost at 5,000. There's almost 5,000 women in there who are just living it out every day. And it's a great community to come and build connection and to ask hard questions. And I always share all of my coaching workshops and my, we've got a sale right now for Sisterhood Cafe. Always share those kind of links in the Christian Women Who Lead group. So it's a great place to hang out. And it's such an amazing community. I'm really honored that God lets me have a say in creating that and just be a part of it, being in there.
Yes, and I'm a member of that community. It is a great place to connect with other women. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Angela. I appreciate you here today, and we look forward to seeing you in your community or over in our community.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.